So thank you very much again for joining us. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter this evening, Guadalupe Ramirez, who's a licensed clinical social worker. I'll let her tell you a little bit more about herself, and then she'll take us through this evening's content. Thank you for joining us tonight, Lupe.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rigo. I'm glad to be here again. I was here last year and I'm glad to join you guys this year. And I appreciate that you guys as a district are taking into consideration that, we're at that time of the year where we're anticipating some changes into transitioning into either a new setting or a new school. If your child is transitioning from middle school or from elementary to middle school, from middle school to high school. So it is great that we can provide this for you guys and I can be of service to support the families in understanding what is going on sometimes with our young people and also what can we do to help out. So I do have a presentation and we will be allowing for some times for questions at the end of the presentation. There could be questions also in the chat that could be addressed at the end. So if you feel like you want to go ahead and hold on to them towards the end, you can go ahead and post them at that time or post them now and we'll read through them as we get through our presentation today. So let me share my screen so that way we can go ahead and be able to see. Let me make sure it's in presenter. There you go. So welcome everyone. We will be talking today about how you can support your student in time of change. The purpose of today's presentation is to understand how transitions can affect our students, like I mentioned earlier, and then how can we adjust to those changes, how to recognize challenges, and find practical ways to build support networks around what is happening with our young person. That builds confidence and it helps just navigating a system that is new, both as a parent and as a young person. So we're hoping that we have lots of questions and interactions from you guys regarding this topic. So why do we want to present on this? Every year, this time around, we're excited about, certain changes, and those changes are sometimes can be abrupt and sometimes can be planned. For our young person moving into a new setting, whether it's a natural transition or a transition that is different, we want to go ahead and build upon that because there can be some changes and with the new expectations on academic progress that we were tending to see. We could see some stress develop around the uncertainty of the unknown. We can also see that there's a sense of disruption in the relationships that they have, either with their setting that they were used to or also with their peer relationships. And then we also want to factor in that this is a time where you as a parent or a caregiver can have an opportunity to invest in your young person and what this transition looks like. So I think this is great timing for us to be able to look at how we can plug in what we know about our young person and also what we can do with the surrounding resources that we have. So we know that this transitions, like I mentioned earlier, can sometimes be natural. They can also sometimes be just different. And this is a way for us to find new opportunities where we can problem solve and we can explore how to connect with our young person. How can we explore and grow and discover together? So this is an opportunity for us to build new partnerships with our school, the staff that work there, and also the understanding of how the system works, right? What are common cultural things in the new system? Do they acknowledge, different activities? Do they have different clubs, different age groups? Do they have different types of servicing that you were not aware or used to in your previous setting? You can explore those activities, explore those programs, and just get to know your new setting. That includes your students' teachers and the administration that is going to be new. That is really a key to the success of how you're going to be able to interact with this new setting so that you can find areas of growth. That will also lean onto your student where they can grow the confidence and ability to advocate for themselves in this new year. As they're discovering the new setting, This is a way for them to inject their strengths and their interests. Can they join one of the sports teams? Can they join one of the clubs? Can they participate in an after school program? This is a way for you to recognize what is available for us in this new setting that we can thrive off of. So it's an opportunity for connection and independence from your young person. What can students gain from this change? We know that this is a part of life, and sometimes change can actually be a roadmap for us to build on some of the skills that we want to teach our children. And that includes problem solving, learning new routines, and sometimes learning new habits that may be unfamiliar, right? Is there a better way to engage with a staff member? Is there a way to communicate with the new administration? Is there a way to visit the campus? Those changes are around problem solving and adaptability. That is practicing flexibility and expectations that are about change. So this bit not only builds resiliency for a young person, but it role models how we are a community and how we build confidence. So I think in times of uncertainty, this is something that you can project to your young person, that not only are you thriving in this new environment, but you're supporting the change and you're bringing the best out of the situation. What can you do to support the new school environment? I mentioned earlier that the connection that you build with your new environment is going to include some key components. That includes like daily check-in about schoolwork, also breaks that make this new environment feel like it's manageable. Steps that you can review with your young person to be able to support that there is a way that can feel less stressful or less ambiguous to go ahead and be manageable. Also encouraging independence while offering some hope. This is where you come in to be able to say, what do I know about your situation that can be helpful? How can I communicate that to others in your new environment to support that enhancement? And then use the resources that you have. All of our school settings have a connection not only to family engagement services like this webinar, but also to communication that is in the site. This could be maybe some mental health resources. This could be also partnerships with your administration or with your direct teacher, where you talk about what is needed for your child's success. And this is important because we know that this demonstrates so many of the skills that we want our young person to exhibit. And that is celebrating some of the strides that you do for your young person. And not just the results, you celebrate effort. So I want to acknowledge that this is a time for us to be able to come together and make sure that you have all the tools so that you can have a roadmap to the next step and this new environment that you're about to encounter. The supporting your student through an emotional well-being lens keeps those lines of communication and validates how they're feeling, and also makes things able to build upon what they already have. So really building on their strengths to flesh out some of these new systems, knowing that you are the expert in your child and knowing that there's things that work. And if it's part of the professionals, that you also communicate that to the new setting, that there is a way to manage this that has been successful, or that we can try something new because you are part of the solution and you're part of growing together to being able to meet your students' needs, not only academic, but also through their emotional well-being. A lot of that you will see probably, at the beginning, you see the adjustment period, but then as you go out through the new calendar year, you start to notice some of the flaws and deficiencies that might show up. So keep an eye out open when we're talking about September, October. This is where you can really take these conversations to some of your back to school nights, and also just encourage you to step up and go directly to your support site and ask them, hey, I'm noticing some changes. I want to know how I can be of support to make this effort be a really fruitful effort for everyone, including for my child to feel like they are part of this new community and that they can thrive. So effective communication is going to be key. Stay informed. All we use different systems to communicate to the setting, to parents. We use not only written communication, we use these platforms with our webinars, but we also use announcements through different school platforms. Keep an eye out for your school assignments and reach out early. Like I mentioned, you will start to see that by October, there might be some changes that you want to keep an eye on. If that's the case, act early. Have those conversations early. And that's why we schedule some of these back to school events, some of these communication venues on early so that you have a chance to be proactive. Attend the meetings that you can. This is for those that logged in early, great. But even if you could watch videos or you can say, hey, I missed, one of the sessions. Is there a recording of it? Or can I get the notes from things that happen? Or is there a newsletter or some announcements in the district's website that I can stay up to date? Also, if there needs to be individualized meetings with your team, ask for those. Advocate for your child's needs because that's going to be what is going to be key to moving into a successful year. So that school partnership is going to be key. And definitely, advocate for your needs as well as a parent, because there's a lot of parents out there that also are striving for the same mechanisms. And there's also a lot of community services through our call center, also through Parent Project. There's resources that the district already engages with that support the navigation process that you're encountering. Preparing for a new school transition, let's talk about some of those steps that you guys can have already as preparation for this next school year. Talking to your student and discussing what to expect, especially around any changes with their scheduling. Are they going to have more than one teacher? Are they going to have a schedule that is different from what they're used to? Are they going to have an adjustment with anything that has to do with getting to school and leaving the school campus? Visit the school, get to know how the campus is like and what resources are available to that setting. Review what your child is going to engage in, so like routines, calendars ahead of time, and that you can do it not only through the communication with the site, but you could do it through the district's website. Practice what you are going to be expecting. So give your student enough time during the summer to have these networks of changes established. And that might be having a conversation around, a week or even 2 weeks prior to the change to say, hey, how are we getting ready? And even right now, having these conversations of what does it look like for next year? How are we going to adjust or how are we going to plan for that during the summer? And having that anticipation so that your student is ready come the first week of school, or maybe works towards getting ready as the school year starts with this transition that is less abrupt. Helping your child adjust socially is also going to be part of the spectrum of this new environment. Social adjustment is equally as important as academic adjustment. So families can coach our students through encouragement and through supervision, and also just acknowledging that there's changes and discussing new ways. So we can normalize feelings about the uneasiness of having a new situation. We can communicate and discuss what relationships look like and how this new setting can impact those relationships. Help them practice just meeting new people, introducing themselves, engaging with new friends, and also being open to new friendships in this new setting. Review anything that you feel like is something that your student would be interested in, especially if you know that there's the servicing is already taking place. So for example, if they're interested in the sport that the district or that site provides, or a club, or just an activity that is sponsored by the new site that could be of anticipation for the student, reinforce that they can look forward to that, having that anticipation of being connected. And remember, all kids, including ourselves as adults, want to have a tribe, want to feel like they're part of a group. And this is where we start those conversations early. How do you manage being part of a group that is a healthy way of setting those boundaries and setting your expectations around these new relationships? So that's where we come in and talking about what do good friendships look like? What are friendships that maybe we want to take a look at, and what are activities that are acceptable and that we encourage? So these are the kind of conversations we should start having to be able to prompt them into our expectations and our encouragement, most of all. Academic transitions, we know that this is part of building our building steps for young people. And we want to know that if there's any gaps that were already set up, that we communicate this to the new environment. For example, we have maybe parents that have students with IEPs, and that there was something that was really great about the prior or the past resources that were given. This is an area where us as parents can or caregivers can communicate some of those gaps that maybe this new environment isn't aware of. And building those connections early on for our students of trusted adults that they can respond to early, and setting realistic expectations about what our next type of setting looks like and what will be asked of the student, whether that's the time that they get up, the time that they're doing work, their behavior around academics, and also what is expected after school and their behavior there. So communicate with your teacher early and with your administration if needed in the new site. And most of all, keep light and monitor. Monitor the progress and note the support that it is working for them, and ask for the support that is needed if that is the case. So this is going to be key throughout the year, because our students, when they fall behind, they don't tend to tell us, they actually tend to show us. And that is where we come into play and we do some problem solving with them. So our relationship with monitoring is going to be a key to how we project and how we show and role model our students what active parenting looks like. And that includes building resilience. Our kids are resilient. They adjust, they adapt to these changes, and they move forward. And that is what we want to show them. We want to show them resiliency, how it's enacted, how it's practiced, how we do problem solving. So that is where we come into play, where we support that function. We problem solve, we ask, what can we try next? That didn't work. Is there something that we can try that might work better? What is keeping us from maybe, doing it worse? Maybe we can keep on trying that and see if we can see some of improvement. Name the changes and plan the next manageable steps. This is where small steps gain progress and we develop growth patterns. So identifying them early on is part of our job to be able to support that growth. Persistence. Remember, small steps create big changes. So changes happen in tiny bits. And that is where we come along to be able to show some reflection and some insight in helping our students move past some of their challenges and showing successes during hard times. So all of these things, we practice them on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is our turn to be able to show our young people how we engage with them in a new setting and where they can thrive. Special considerations that we know is that when we go from elementary level into maybe a middle school, there's a need for restructuring and reconfiguring how their day looks like. So this is where we support our students build structure that supports this new setting of having more teacher interaction, having a different schedule, maybe being exposed to even more students in their environment, and different student engagement. We might have students that are entering sixth grade and they're interacting with eighth graders that might be emotionally more mature. So this is where we find that monitoring and encouragement are part of the key to supporting our students. In the middle school level, we see that students benefit more around coaching, right? Peer connection is a big deal during that area of support. And so organizing and having some self-reliance and independency is going to be key to those middle school ages. How do they go from maybe needing a lot of help to thriving off on their own and building some independence? Slow steps are what's going to build some of those resiliency patterns. So in middle school, you'll see that you'll have more challenges around coaching and around peer relationships. And this is where your interaction and your dialogue with your student comes into play. In the high school, this is where they're learning some life skills. So they are in search of needing responsibility, showing independence, resiliency, and future planning. This is where we can guide and we can reinforce what we have been teaching elementary and middle school ages. This is where they practice self-advocacy. They engage in what they feel they're gaining out of the system. So this is where hobbies, peer relationships, and practicing life skills comes into play. So we actually take a step back and we're more on a guidance practice and with a lot of supervision. So there's changes not only internally for the young person, but changes in the way that we interact with the young person too. And we build off of those stepping stones and milestones that they have to be able to work towards some of the life skill building. When do we want to seek additional support? So we want to reach out when we feel like there's concerns that are persistent and that things intensify, that your daily life might be interfering and that their learning and their relationships have some impairment. So that might seem very different for different students, but in general, we see it play out with emotional distress. We see it play out with academic struggling, concerns about generally their mental health, and we see that their relationships with their peers, with the teachers, are sometimes disruptive. So this is where we want to seek support not only from the school but for community engagement. This might be that we start with touching bases with our school and saying, hey, I see some issues going on in these areas, and I want to know how the school is able to support. What kind of services are available? We have all of us have some of us have managed care plans, and some of us have access to our services in the county through Medi-Cal. And whatever way that is, there's systems in place already within our schools that are able to target some of those features. So we are here to support your child. And at the end of the day, when your student thrives, we thrive. So that's really the core of our presentation, to be able to know that we want to seek that your student is in the best setting that they can to be able to be resilient and to thrive next year. So I'm going to pause my presentation and then we're going to take some questions. I know that we've had some people in the chat. So Rigo, if you can help me with some of those questions while I open up the chat.
Sure thing, Lupe. No questions about the content so far. There were a few about the connection. It sounds like they were able to log back in, but no questions at the moment. However, if you do have a question, feel free to drop it off or drop it into the chat, and we can have Lupe answer it for you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention a couple of things that I briefly reviewed. Students with IEPs or with specific interventions that they were supported during the previous school year. I want to note that as parents, you can discuss that with the new setting, especially around if something didn't work. We don't want to put the student in more stress than they need. And so that communication as a parent is going to be key to your new setting, knowing that this type of support worked. And then you want to also ask, hey, is there something here that is additional to what I experienced in the past? Maybe that new intervention or that new system can also work. So you want to explore that. You want to go ahead and have an open mind around what the new system has. So
Lupe, oh
go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say, we do have a question. So the first question I see here is, are there any different coping strategies for changing schools due to elementary school closures?
I think the messaging is still the same. School closures are a challenging time for everyone, including the young person. And this is where we could use the same interventions that I just talked about. We want to encourage that change sometimes happens, whether it's planned or whether it wasn't planned, but that we are going to be role modeling that they are happening. And what can we do and make this scenario the best case scenario? So, as parents, we want to be vigilant that we are sending also that message, but what do we have from the new setting that we can help our student thrive off of? And that's going to be really key because it almost feels like, right, if we sit on it, if we place ourselves as parents in a negative aspect about it, we can influence some of our students' engagement. We can technically have some impairments be counter transferred. And we want to actually do the opposite. We want to show them that there's adaptation to change and that we use what we know and what we have with problem solving. So some of those coping skills around sharing with your student are around resiliency and how do we start new? How do we start from what we have? And those were similar to the techniques that I talked about earlier.
Thank you, Lupe. There are some questions here more about logistics. So a changing principal, when will the announcement be made? Questions about scheduling. Or those questions I don't have specific answers for. I can say generally that most middle schools will communicate either before the end of the school year, most likely during the summer. They'll start reaching out to incoming families about all of the orientation and events that will be happening at the start of the next school year. That's for both middle and high, where students will be able to purchase PE uniforms, pick up class schedules, perhaps get to visit the campus, etc. So look for that information coming your way, most likely via Parent Square as we get closer to the beginning of the year. And with regards to the hiring of middle schools, that is fully dependent on human resources, on applicants, the interview process. So they will be keeping the community informed in terms of when that will be. Typically, they try to get that done before school ends, so everybody knows who the new principal will be. But I can't speak specifically to that timeline. There are questions about whether high schools provide counseling sessions when requested by a student, or are there recommended outside support services? So I'll let you go ahead and speak to it, Lupe, then I can share generally San Jose Unified processes.
Yeah, so if you know or want to request counseling services, the best way to do that is to start with your current placement and let them know the reason why you're requesting those services because it will help us understand if the behavior that you want to address is impacting the school setting. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So acknowledging and assessing what's the right fit would be the first thing. So that would be more of a conversation with the new site. If you feel like the behavior is impacting school, then reaching out to your school administration would be a starting point. And then Rigo, if you want to clarify if there's different types of levels of counseling, as for outside counseling, there's a couple of systems. One, our managed care plans or our insurance, for the most part, provides mental health services for folks that have Medi-Cal, which is our standard to the county. There are county services through our call center. So I'm going to be pulling up that website at the very end after we answer a couple of questions.
Thank you, Lupe. And then just to speak specifically for San Jose Unified, so all of our schools will have, from elementary through secondary, will have one or more counselors on site. It really varies depending on the level of school, also the size of the school. So as Lupe said, reaching out to your administration early if you believe your child will have a need for services. The student can also request to speak to a counselor whenever there is a need as well. And then in terms of ongoing counseling support, again, these school counselors can support, but there are also outside providers, outside agencies that work with the schools to support if there's a more intensive need or more of a recurring need that perhaps the school counselor isn't able to meet. So there are several options available for students and for families, all the way from elementary through to the secondary schools. Let's see here.
And so, Rico, I just wanted to
Yes.
mention that I put in the chat, if you have Medi-Cal, behavioral health does have counseling services. If you have a private insurance, then you can actually call your insurance company and ask to be connected to a mental health provider.
Thank you, Lupe. Let's see. Additional questions about logistics. With regard to support at the new school that your child will be attending, again, those are questions for the specific school site. So in terms of the elementary schools are consolidating, staffing is currently being assigned. So contacting that school, they should be able to let you know specifically what they can count on with regard to additional academic support, social emotional support. So they should be able to provide more specific information about their staffing for the coming year. I believe most of that is finalized, but that would be the best place to begin. I don't have a full picture of how every school staffing is sorting out at the moment. Let's see. We still have some time. Are there any additional questions for Lupe with regard to the content from this evening?
I also see there's a question about someone's son has an IEP as a kindergartner, and the therapist, they would like to have the therapist that they had. This would be a conversation about with each individual site regarding that. And so the IEP would have to be evaluated to see what type of level of servicing each student requires. So the short answer to all of that would be that the parent would meet with or request a meeting with the new administration to be able to go over the IEP and have that conversation regarding the request. So we also see a question about supporting your student with a higher population environment. And along with the lines of what I mentioned earlier, it's really good to know that these changes, whether it was a school closure or whether it's a transition like from, let's say, a really small elementary to a middle school that has a higher population, the concepts are very relevant, that it creates a lot of uneasiness sometimes, and it creates some changes. And this is where we want to encourage and develop some of the coping mechanisms that I talked earlier about adjusting to change, supporting the student understand the dynamics of the new environment, and supporting ways to embed themselves in this new environment in a positive manner, whether it be a connection through a club, through their staff, or through just touring the new site. The unknown is what creates a lot of anxiety in our young people. So the more exposure you have earlier on by either touring or attending a back to school night or supporting even just visiting the new campus, and what are the common areas? How will I pick you up? How will you engage with your new friendships? How would you avoid things that might be not good for you? Having those clear expectations with your young person is going to be key to a successful year, and adjusting and those conversations, having them now versus, hey, you're starting a new school year tomorrow. You're going to go ahead and, this is what's going to happen. So early on conversations are going to be key.
Thank you, Lupe. And then I can share that there are events happening at the receiving schools for next school year from the schools that are being closed. So I believe there are school tours that have been happening for parents, joint parent meetings. I believe there are field days planned as well. My understanding at the elementary level for the students. Those are happening in the coming weeks. So those are opportunities for the student to become a little bit more familiar with the new environment. Lupe, I don't see any new questions coming up. Is there anything you'd like to close with?
I want to close off that we are key to the success of our young people. It starts from us through the role modeling process, through the ability to show our own resiliency around change, and also how we thrive in environments that we all have to adjust to. So it starts with us and it goes and like reflects off of the young person. So I wanted to share that as we close this off because we are key to our children's success. So the more that you embed in this new environment, the more that your student is going to get off of that. And I know there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of anticipation, and having those early interventions is what's going to make some of those feelings be less impactful.
Lupe, there's a question here. My soon-to-be sixth grader is anxious about their new middle school. Older brother will be an eighth grader. Do you recommend sixth grade independence or relying on the older sibling?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Sixth grade independence, is that specifically to something? Or like,
I think the question is whether the recommendation is the sixth grader and eighth grader will be at the same school site next year. Sixth grader is new to the school, so I think the question is referring to, is it better to have the sixth grader be more independent of the older sibling or depend on them somewhat for that transition?
yeah, and you know what? That will come naturally from the sibling set. There probably will be some connection at the beginning of the school year to do some of that hurdle help. And then your sixth grader will want to have and build upon those skills that they have learned and information that they have learned. So I think it really is an individual base. It is natural for a sixth grader to start anxious, but to build on the resiliency that they have. So monitoring their progress is really going to be fundamental. Noting that if they're behind or struggling with something, that is where you kick in to be able to support them in a way. But if you see that the natural progression is that they start with some codependency on their sibling to guide them, give them some instruction, and then they take off on their own, that is their resiliency flourishing. That is them thriving. So hopefully that was a clear answer, but the key is monitoring that progress. And I wanted to close out, Rigo, that our children are resilient. That is what their core main, right? They're made out of resiliency and they do adapt to change. And so for us, sometimes we have more anxiety than they do, and that is okay. But we need to just continue to be insightful, monitor, supervise, and make sure that they have the tools to thrive in this new environment.
Thank you, Lupe. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you for the questions that we hope that we're able to answer them again to the best of our ability. We are offering this webinar once again next week in Spanish. So if you know of anyone who may benefit from this information in Spanish, we're offering that next Wednesday, the 13th, same time here. And again, we are recording this, so we will share this out so that you can refer back to it if needed. And Lupe, I don't know if there are any other resources that you might, it doesn't have to be now, but perhaps you can share with me that I can forward to our families when I share the recording that they can perhaps look up online or anywhere else that you suggest, perhaps some reading material that they can refer to on their own as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna put together, I have some information for parent contact about our crisis line. We have some free resources around mental health that the state provides. I also have sort of a guide to helping parents ask their insurance company or their primary physician to be able to connect them to any counseling services but just in general, some tips about supporting your student. So I can send those out, Rigo, and we can share them out with this presentation.
Great, thank you very much. So thank you so much, Lupe, for joining us this evening again, and thank you again, parents, for logging in this evening. Look for the recording coming to your email inboxes soon, and if you have any questions beyond today, please send us an email at familyengagement@sjusd.org. That's where the email address that you'll be getting the recording through. So there's a question about where you can find the recording. So we will send it directly to everyone who registered, but we'll also post it on our San Jose Unified School District website, specifically the family engagement page. So if you visit sjusd.org, search for family engagement, the first search result should be our page. And as you scroll down, you'll see the webinar links or webinar recordings menu, which has a variety of webinars there. On a variety of topics, academic, social, emotional. I think Lupa's webinar from last year is posted there. So we'll be adding this one to the library as well. So look for that in your inboxes next couple days. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you again, Lupe, for the information. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.